Welcome everyone to today's Lunchtime Real seminar, the Dear Real Model Classroom Strategies for Twice Exceptional Students. We're excited to have you here. In case you're not familiar with Real, you probably are if you're here, but just in case, we are a nonprofit and we strive to ensure that Silicon Valley Twice Exceptional students thrive at school by raising parent and educator awareness and understanding of strategies to support their needs. So just so we're all on the same page, our definition of 2E that comes from the Bridges 2E Center for Research and Development is that it is a combination of distinguishing strengths, high ability or potential in one or more areas, and complex challenges such as dyslexia, autism, ADHD, anxiety that combine, the yellow and the blue combine to make a green student that has both distinguishing strengths and complex challenges at the same time. Their strengths and challenges interact and they need support that encompasses both of these exceptionalities, which makes them a complex learning profile, as you know. Real's website has a lot of resources, including recordings of past talks, such as this one. And we have them all organized by topic. We have articles, we have white papers, we have downloadables. So please make use of our resources and you can also share them with your educators. We do have some upcoming events. We have our bi-monthly parent support group where we break into breakout rooms and everyone shares ideas and suggestions and support to each other. So you can go ahead and mark those dates. And you can RSVP for all of these on real2e.org. We have 3 outstanding psychologists coming to speak about various therapies for anxiety on November 13th. And then one of the top requested topics in January, we have writing solutions for 2E learners. We will have a student panel discussing their neurodivergent experience in the K-12 time on March 16th to kick off Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And then we will round out the school year with an executive function talk, which was another one of your top requests. Real is also part of a new series called the Neurodiversity Speaker Series. And I just wanted you to know that you can go see their recordings at the Parent Venture YouTube website. And these are all the things that they've done just in the past few months, and more will be coming. So keep an eye out on this website to see interesting talks that are really relevant to our audience. Real has a Google group that you can join. And Kelly, I don't know if you can drop that link in the chat. And there are hundreds of Bay Area parents on there asking and answering each other's questions and looking for resources and supporting one another. There were some really touching posts on there this morning. You can follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on Instagram and see all of our previous recordings on YouTube. So you're here to learn about this today, so I won't say as much about it, but just so you know, this is a workshop that's going to give you an example of things that we discuss with educators. So if you would like to bring us to your school, we have worked with dozens of Bay Area schools to do learning different simulations as well as deeper dive workshops in these areas. And just so you know, Real last year released a 46-page free guide for Twice Exceptional Learners. And it is mostly relevant for anyone living anywhere, but it is specifically written for the Bay Area. So you can go ahead and download that for free on our site as well. And now I will introduce our Executive Director, Abby. I don't know if you want to spotlight her. So Dr. Abby Kirigin is the Executive Director of Real. She's a lifelong learner and passionate advocate of education for all. She brings her many years of experience as an interaction designer with technology startups and parent of 3 children to her work. She recently received her doctorate from the Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity and Education, where for her dissertation, she created a curriculum to support neurodivergent middle schoolers in strength-based career exploration. Abby holds a master's degree in human-computer interaction from Carnegie Mellon and a BA from NYU in computer science and philosophy. She has served as a writer, guest speaker, and presenter for many organizations, including the Stanford Neurodiversity Project, Parents Place, Knowledge Works, California Association for the Gifted, and the National Association for Gifted Children. So I will let you take it away, Abby.
All right, thank you, Yael. All right, hi everyone. I am excited to present this today. I am going to go through the slides, sort of how we do them at workshops for educators. So parents on the call, I'm really glad you're here. This is sort of the idea is to give you a sense of what we are advocating for your learners in our classrooms, and some hopefully ideas that spark for you on how you can help support that as well when you're working with your teachers and your community with your, for your child. So I thought I would start today by defining some terms. The one we always want to start with is the definition of neurodiversity. So neurodiversity, defined by Harvard Medical School, it's an umbrella term that recognizes and embraces the natural variations in human brains and the way we all function. And so what I think is really critical, a really critical concept for everyone to understand around neurodiversity, is that we are all part of the world of neurodiversity. So that means some of us may be neurotypical, or sometimes you hear the phrase neuronormative. That is a type of neurodiversity. And then there are neurodivergent types like ADHD, autistic, dyslexic, dyscalculic, dysgraphic, etc. So all of us live in this community, right? We're all a neurodiverse community. Some are neurodivergent, some are neurotypical. And the other thing that's really critical to think about when we think about this model is that we move away from the more of the old fashioned sort of outdated medical model, where we look at some of those neurodivergences and think that these are things that need to be cured or fixed. We don't approach neurodiversity in that way, but instead we appreciate that everyone is different. There is no, single normal way to be, and that we're going to support everyone in the way that, the things they have to offer and the things they have to bring to our community that make us a richer and more interesting society. And so I thought I would start with a few numbers. So 1 in 5 children have a learning difference or an attention difference, such as dyslexia or ADHD. That's a common stat we hear. So about 20% of children. In California, we have 1 in 22 8-year-olds are identified as autistic. The ratio is a little bit bigger. I think it's 1 in 39 in America, and then 1 in 22 in California. 39% of identified ADHD students also experience anxiety. 37% also experience learning differences, and 14% autistic. So what's really interesting in that stat is just to show you that these things don't happen in isolation. There's a lot of Everyone's complicated, and there's a lot of overlaps, co-occurrence of different diagnoses. And as you start understanding students further, you start to see lots of different nuances and often overlaps. And then at the same time, we're only seeing about 13% of our public school students in Santa Clara and San Mateo counties that are served in special education. So I think that points to the fact that a lot of our students who do have some of these traits, who are neurodivergent, are not formally identified and perhaps not formally supported. And yet we still want to be able to support them so they can reach their potential in our general education classrooms. And so when we think about, again, we approach a student, we look at a student who is neurodivergent, we can really see them in one of two ways. And we really encourage everyone to think about our students from that neurodiversity positive lens and that strength-based lens. So this is a great graphic that illustrates that. On the left, you'll see the more traditional, maybe medical model view of a student with ADHD. So you might see a student who's inattentive, they're hyperactive, they're impulsive, they have low self-control, they're loud, they don't like being bored, so they're very impatient, etc. So a lot of negative words and negative connotations associated with that student. But if we instead really flip our script on this and we look at that same student, but from a strength-based and neurodiversity positive lens, we suddenly see that same student as a student who is energetic and enthusiastic, really brings a lot to any group work. They're really fun loving. They seem like a great entrepreneurial spirit there because they're full of ideas and enthusiasm, and they have a lot to contribute to our class. And so what we really like to encourage at Real is that we define individuals through their strengths rather than letting their weaknesses define them. So what I have on this screen is going to be a number of prominent and famous individuals who are neurodivergent. And it, again, not to say that all of our neurodivergent students need to become prominent individuals who would go up on a slide of famous folks, but just that when we rethink of these folks, um, and we don't let their differences define them in a negative manner, but we see their potential, we really see different individuals. So when we see people like Steven Spielberg making connections across disciplines, Steve Jobs with his incredible abilities at 3D spatial perspectives and thinking, or Octavia Butler, an incredibly successful science fiction author, and her abilities to create stories and worlds, concepts, her narrative reasoning. These are all individuals with dyslexia. Or we save Dave Pilkey with his creative out of the box thinking. He's the author of the Captain Underpants series, wildly popular with children. Simone Biles, she has enthusiasm, dedication, drive. Or Richard Branson, he's very risk taking, adventurous, novelty seeking, very successful entrepreneur. These are all individuals with ADHD. Or we see David Byrne with his knowledge, skill, and passion, motivation in his interest areas. Sir Anthony Hopkins, intently focused on details, which is really how he's so successful at getting his characters to feel so real. Or Hannah Gadsby, the very successful comedian, and her logical thinking and honesty that has led to her success. These are all individuals with autism. So again, thinking about how these differences really contributed to their success, and they use them to define themselves in a positive way. And that's what we want for our children. And so, yeah, I already went through this slide, so I won't spend too much time on it, but it is important then that we spend a little bit of time talking about what it means to be twice exceptional. And these are often those students that when we talked about the numbers who aren't being formally diagnosed or are often missed because these are students whose strengths are able to mask their challenges, or their challenges are perhaps masking their strengths, and they appear sort of confusing, they don't fit in one clear bucket. And I think that's one of the most important things that often educators may overlook. They are able to support students who are in special education. They often have programs that are designed to support students who are able to move very quickly and be in advanced classes, but they don't really think too much about the child who really needs a bit of both and who needs a combination of both. And these are our twice exceptional children. And so just to dig into that a little bit deeper, this is sort of what you might expect a profile of a your average sort of student, or your expected profile of a student. So the student is not, every student's not going to meet that expected age-based expectations exactly, right? So in this mythical student here has slightly lower working memory, slightly stronger emotional regulation, but by and large, the line, if we drew it across all their different points, is fairly flat, fairly even. Um, when we look at a twice exceptional child, we're looking at someone who's much more jagged. So in this particular example, it's a student who is autistic and has ADHD. And so it's a student who has very high vocabulary and reading level, and they also have really strong math reasoning. And yet their math performance is a little bit lower. And that has to do with their below age-based expectations on their processing speed. And so this leads to a student who has very strong math reasoning, who feels very capable in understanding math concepts, and yet is only able to perform at a level that they feel may be holding them back and feel very frustrating. And that also can be due to some of their lower abilities at writing. So if they get lots and lots of worksheets in math, and they're a little bit behind the curve on writing and a little bit slower in their processing speed, that's maybe bringing down their math performance. And there's a real disconnect between their feelings of math being too easy, their concepts come quickly, the understanding is really there, and yet it's also too hard in that they're not able to show what they know in their typical classroom environment. And because their social development and emotional regulation are also a little bit behind grade level, some of that frustrating feeling that this student feels can really come out in ways that are unexpected in the classroom, in ways that um, cause the teacher to feel a little bit confused and sort of not sure how to handle this. So this is a kind of typical example of a jagged profile of our twice exceptional students who, when you look across that line, have very high highs and have some lows. And this is really causing a lot of challenges for the student and for to be in typical classrooms as well. And it's also important to understand that there are neurodivergent students, even among our high achieving students. So 5 to 20% of students defined sort of as gifted, high potential students may have learning disabilities. Almost 9% of children with ADHD can be identified as those high achieving students. 19% of students underachieving can meet the referral criteria for ADHD inattentive. And 2 to 20% of autistic learners are those gifted learners, and they have a higher likelihood of being diagnosed late, experiencing higher anxiety, and several other undesirable effects. And this does have far-ranging implications. So 11% of academically advanced special education students are considered appropriately served. 60% of students is the lower ability for the 2E ADHD students to modulate motor activity. So the 2E elements of their profile can often make those ADHD students be even more dysregulated. There's a 30% lower chance that a 2E dyslexic student will actually reach math proficiency. So again, even though dyslexia is traditionally thought of as a writing and reading difference, because there is so much of that in math, and that can often hold these students back and preventing them from achieving their potential in the math rates as well. And unfortunately, there is a 5 times likelihood increased suicidal ideation among 2E autistic children. And so these students, when not addressed in our classrooms, do have real experiences that are frustrating, rejection, can feel experiences of loneliness, anxiety, depression, which can have an increased risk of many negative effects like chronic absenteeism, school avoidance, low self-concept, etc. And the research has shown that for the culturally, linguistically, and economically diverse communities, challenges are often compounded because teachers are often more likely to focus on deficits than strengths. And in our own real survey that we conducted recently of parents in our community, we saw that 50% of parents report that those highly asynchronous Silicon Valley learners just aren't thriving in school. And so, what can we do? So this is often, where we'll talk to I'll talk to our school teachers and our educators. We may put them through some empathy exercises. They do simulations. We talk about all of those consequences, and we think, okay, what's next? And so at Real, we put together the Deal Real model. It's a 4-part model designed to help educators think through different ways to support neurodivergent and twice exceptional learners in their classrooms. In fact, we believe that all the recommendations really will improve classroom experiences for all of the students, the entire neurodiverse community of a classroom. And this work that it kind of came together in partnership with an educator advisory group. We have an extra group, about 8 to 10 educators who work in public schools as teachers. We have principals, we have private school learning specialists and other folks. We have folks at the district level, and we have some folks also working as teachers to teach new educators. And we work with them to discuss ideas that work for the classroom, and also based on years of collecting data and hearing anecdotal stories from parents in our community about what works and how teachers can be more effective in working with these students. So this is the model that we have created. There is a white paper available on our website that you can freely download, and you'll get a lot more details. But the rest of this session today, I will kind of walk you through an overview of this model and the techniques. So the first petal of our flower model is around developing connection. So with developing connection, it's a very critical component of working with any 2E student. Now, I think that it's really critical. I think most teachers would agree that this is one of the reasons they got into teaching. They love working with kids. They want those connections and they want to develop those connections. And I do truly think that this is an important thing that all teachers do try to do with all students, and it will improve educational outcomes for all students. I think it's important to say that it's just very critical for our twice exceptional students, because there's and our neurodivergent students. These are students who are struggling in class, working through things that are frustrating, working through things that are hard, that are challenging, and without a feeling that they have a safe person who they trust, who really sees them, knows what they're good at, can appreciate that they are working hard. It's just very hard to get them to really be their best selves in class. And so, what we're asking is, when it comes to this pedal, is a bit of a mind shift to think about, how does this kid's battery work, if you will? What charges them up, what drains them, and what sustains them? So really try to get to know those children. And some quick tips around this are to listen and to be approachable and to share wins with colleagues. This is something we talk about a lot. You might be in a class, especially if you're maybe a middle school or high school student, and you only see these students in a single context, like maybe you only see them in math class. And so maybe you have a student who's really, really struggling in math. A great way to understand what this student might be good at, or to understand the student, is to look at them in a different context. So talk to the teachers teaching some of the other subjects, find out what electives the student is in, or what clubs the student does after school, and sort of take some time to observe them and see them in the context where they really are shining. And then when you see that student being their best selves, I think it helps you understand sort of maybe techniques or just ways to talk with the student that will connect you more with them. Um, you can also intentionally collect information. So you can do it in that passive where you're chatting with colleagues, you're observing students in other contexts, but you can also talk to them. There are some documents and forms. We have a lot of resources of different tools you can use to kind of gather this information and find ways to connect. This is a great example of one of those tools. It's a document you can download freely from the University of Connecticut, and it helps you sort of understand what ways the student likes to communicate, what they're interested in, and that helps you start that groundwork in terms of figuring out ways to connect with them. We also love this guiding questions graphic. It has a bunch of really great, things to think about when you're thinking about working with your students. So thinking about, does this child have a sense of belonging in our school? Am I being intentional about the energy I'm bringing? Will this build or break trust? And the other question that I think is really great is, are we having enough fun? Now, one of the folks you saw on um, the notable neurodivergent individual was Simone Biles, and she's got this great quote where she says, "When I'm smiling and having fun, I perform my best." And so it's really interesting to think about, because obviously what she does at the very highest level of gymnastics in her sport, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of competition, there's a ton of hard work, I'm sure, right? But that's not the stuff that she highlights when she says, when is she at her best? It's when she's having a good time, when she's enjoying herself. And I think that speaks a lot to this notion that if we can create a positive community where our students feel seen and they feel like they're coming to school and having a good time, we can bring out their best selves. So we also have in our document, and here today are some stories of real students that we have seen in our community, and a little bit about how these experiences have helped them. So Ava in this story was a 2E high school student who wanted to study environmental science in college. And in elementary school, her teacher observed, quote, that, oh, she's eager to learn, she's motivated to learn, and she surpassed her reading goals by over 600%. However, by middle school, she started noticing that feedback that her teachers gave her shifted from kind of commending that exceptional motivation to instead suggesting politely that perhaps she turn in assignments more quickly and focus on ways to raise her grades. So ultimately, she completed high school at Middle College, and she told us, and this is on the slide here, that two of the greatest and most supportive teachers she'd ever had understood the hardships that her learning disability brought her, but didn't choose to look at them as hardships. Instead of ridiculing the time it took her to turn in writing assignments, they celebrated the achievements and focused on the content of the assignments. And so instead of being upset with her for needing to take some minutes alone during class, they always saw her and understood that she might need those things and always asked if there are other ways to help. So ultimately, they treated her as an equal in no way an adult had before, and it made her feel comfortable enough to believe in her own abilities as a student. So it was that connection and respect that the teacher showed her that allowed her to bring out really her best self and her own confidence in her abilities. And so Ava is a high school student, but we'll also talk a little bit about Alec here. And Alec just joined fifth grade, and he was new to the country from El Salvador. He was brilliant, but also had untreated ADHD. And compounding this, Alex was new to the US, so just beginning to learn the language and culture. Alex's teacher gave him a stack of blank note cards, and they made a deal that at the end of each day they would trade cards. Alex gave his teacher one card with a Spanish word that she needed to memorize, and then she would give him one card with a concept that they had studied during the day. One time, Alec even wrote up a quiz for his teacher to take on the same day that she gave the students a math quiz. This connection, this personal connection that the two of them developed, helped the transition into the class and increased Alec's buy-in and sense of belonging. So the last thing I want to show you on this pedal is this graphic. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the tips for all of the different levels, elementary, middle, and high school. But what I want you to know is that in the document that we have on our website, we have broken out each of these pedals to very specific and practical things you can do at at all three, the elementary, the middle, and the high school level. So there may be things like in the high school, like supporting student-led neurodiversity advocacy efforts, helping establish a neurodiversity club. In middle school, doing some things around identity. So understanding your own identity as a teacher and a learner and sharing that with your students and helping them understand their identities as neurodivergent learners. And other things that you can do at the elementary school level. So very specific and practical things that educators can do to make a change. The next pedal is around embracing flexibility. So the mind shift we're asking for here is for teachers. Ultimately, if you're familiar with UDL, it's to embrace Universal Design for Learning, UDL. And this is a concept where we, as educators, consider the core goal of any assignment or project or experience, and we think about how we can be allowing students flexible ways of both receiving information about that goal or that information, that project, and how we can let them be flexible in ways they can show what they know. So things you can do to be more successful here are to make small adjustments to the assignments, to offer choices for, again, how a student can consume the information related to this and how they can show what they know, and ultimately, again, implementing UDL. Lots of information and resources here. I'll just give a quick example. And this is the UDL screen, so we can go here. So for example, let's say you are a teacher and you just taught a unit on a specific time period during the Civil War. So maybe there was a specific battle that you focused on, and perhaps you allowed students multiple ways of learning about that battle. They could read original accounts. They could read historical textbooks or textbooks. They could listen to those things with audiobooks. They could watch YouTube videos that you've, pre-screened and make sure they provide the information for them. So a number of different ways that they can consume that information. Then when it comes to showing what they know about this and what they've learned, you again offer options. So one student might write a 5-paragraph essay, which might be more of the traditional way of making sure the students have learned about this assignment. But since the goal of this assignment is not learning how to write a 5-paragraph essay, the goal is really to make sure the students have understood the concepts of the Civil War, the elements of the Civil War that you're teaching, you can allow them to do a number of different things. Perhaps the student could do a podcast where they interview different characters that were on scene during those events, and they hear them talk, and they could write a script and then read it and record it as a podcast. They could do a diorama or do a painting. Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened. You guys still see my screen? No, right?
We do. We still see it.
I have something that says my screen sharing is paused.
Now it's paused. It wasn't before.
I don't know what's happening. Well, my screen sharing is paused.
Now it says you've started screen sharing.
I can't see it anymore. I'm going to try one more time and then I will just, I don't know, keep going. Yeah, I can't
You
see
can
them.
try to
I don't
share
know.
the slides if you want.
Yeah, I can try to share them, but I don't know which
Oh.
presentation you're using.
Meeting. Hold on. That's just so strange. Why does it say this?
I think I found your presentation if you'd like me to share it.
Go ahead, fine, sure. I don't know what happened.
Mhm.
No,
Well, nope, those were the slides I went through. This one, 805. Everyone gets to see.
it's not
There
that
we
one.
go.
It's not that one.
It's not this one.
No.
I think I see it's different. Mhm. Everyone can watch me look through. This is the one I just showed. You said it's not this one, even though it has the date on it. Do you know what it was called?
It's like it's disappeared from my whole world for some reason. I don't get it.
Showing we can still have technical difficulties after all this time on Zoom.
It's called Dear Real October. Here, let's one more time. Okay, now I bet you see it, right?
We see it now. Yeah.
Okay.
Where?
Sorry. Okay. So
you see it there? Okay, great.
Yes. So the last thing I would say about that example of having those options of the Civil War is just to remember that being flexible is not about lowering or changing the standards in any way. It's very important that the standards are the same for all the different ways the student will show what they know. What we're doing is providing options that allow flexibility in how they do that, but the rubrics will be, ultimately, like, what the standards are always the same.
Can I just ask just real quick if everyone else sees your slides, because I do not see your slides at this point.
We can see them.
I'm seeing slides. Yeah.
Great. I will not worry about me because I have seen these slides before.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but anyway, okay. So this is John. And when John was younger, he loved to sit and page through books, and he listened intently while his parents read huge chapter books to him. But he struggled to read once he hit first grade, and he spent hours after school working with his teachers, but made no progress. He was cognitively ready for advanced concepts, but stuck at simple word books. So he began to be very frustrated and bored in class. He hated reading. He refused to open books. He began to hide in his closet to avoid school. And once his parents learned that John was dyslexic, he started to receive intense individualized tutoring for phonemic awareness and reading. But at the same time, John's parents and teachers didn't let his lack of ability to read words on a page stop him from feeding his desire to learn and excite his imagination. So he instead kind of got turned on to that world of audiobooks, and he would listen very, very quickly to audiobooks. And in fact, listen to so many books that his vocabulary just really blossomed and grew, and he was able to re-engage with the classroom, because while he was separately working on his challenges related to reading and dyslexia, he was still able to feed that desire and interest to listen to and understand and participate in conversations that really met his needs and interests when it came to comprehension. And this is Heather. In second grade, Heather was assigned to make a model of a biome, any biome that appealed to her. So most students did make a physical object, but Heather's fine motor skills were very limited. So instead, Heather's teacher allowed her to build her model virtually. She used the computer program Scratch and programmed animals to talk to the viewer about their interactions with other animals in the savannah. Her giftedness showed through in those details that she learned about the food web, even though she did the work slightly differently than everyone else in the classroom. And here's another example. This is Ben. In sixth grade, Ben showed tremendous presentation and speaking skills, and he could remember everything he read about a topic of interest. So while the class prepared to make a presentation, the teacher noticed that Ben had amazing completed slides, but he was really struggling to make speaker notes, which was something that she had asked the class to do. So since the learning goal of the assignment, though, was not writing skills, but the presentation skills, she allowed Ben to skip that step and go straight to presenting. And he was able to use his tremendous memory and storytelling strengths to kind of bypass that weakness and not get in the way of producing a great assignment. And he even agreed to present first in class and created set a really high bar for all the students that followed. So here are some of those practical strategies at every level around embracing flexibility. So these are offering accommodations such as flexible seating, quiet zones, opportunities for movement, and suggesting definitely that we offer this for all our students, because when we normalize our accommodations, we make a class where we recognize that everyone needs different things at different times. You don't need to have some sort of formal label to receive something because it's no different, better or worse than anyone else. So we offer these accommodations to everyone. We explain why they're used, why someone might choose to use them, how to use them properly, and then we allow folks the autonomy to pick whether or not that will help them benefit them in the classroom. And there are lots of different strategies for every level. The third pedal is around attending to strengths. This one has a lot of overlap with flexibility, but also with developing connection. But what we really want to do in this, when we're thinking through this, the lens of this pedal, is to think, how can we shift energy from kind of thinking about deficits and thinking about ways we kind of move students who are struggling and help them. And of course we want to do that. We want to shift some of that energy to spending it on thinking about, what are these students great at, and how can I be a talent scout and really uncover it and then nurture it and honor it and support it in the classroom. So ways we can do that are doing some of those similar things that apply during UDL, Universal Design for Learning, such as providing opportunities for choice within units and using interest-based grouping. But another really interesting technique or thing to think about is to really create that time and space for students to work on strengths and interests. So in some classrooms that might look like a passion project, or it might just be a free time where each student has identified something that that's interesting to them, that they want to work on, and they're able to do that during an independent learning time. Another important thing to think about when we're thinking in this lens is to think about being very mindful when we're asking students to do some of that extra support. So you might have a student who needs extra time on a test, or you may have a student who needs to go to an OT session or a learning specialist session. Being very mindful of how we incorporate those into our students' day. I think often what we hear from parents is that teachers or the school may find a time where it's like the child, well, let's say the child, oh, they're really, really great at math. And so we'll let them skip math to go to their OT session. But that math session that they were very good at was the one thing they really look forward to. They loved it. It made them feel great. They were able to do something that really interested them and excited them. They felt really good at it. And that was the time they were able to refill their bucket and really feel good about being in school. If we pull them out of that time, we're denying them that opportunity. Another great example is a common practice of having students miss their PE or lunch or recess time to do that extra time on tests or other work completion. But that's often the time that those students needed to recharge, to get outside and run around and let off some of that energy and just have a good time, again, refuel their own buckets. And the best strategy I can suggest is to ask the students what time might work with them, maybe ask the parents what they think, and come up with a way that's mutually agreeable to everyone, where the students still has the time and space honored, the thing that they love. They don't miss their electives. They get to do those things that really make them want to come to school. Again, and that's so critical, because when they are able to appreciate that they like to be there, they see that they're seen for their strengths, they see that those strengths are incorporated and encouraged and supported in their classroom, they're willing to take on challenges, they're more willing to try hard on things that are struggling, because they have that full battery. They're feeling good, they know what they're good at, and they know that they're given that time and space to do that. And so this graphic is sort of inspired by an original graphic by Dr. Robin Shader. She has the yellow part of that triangle up there. So her key insight was that she was always seeing parents, teachers, and students kind of feeling like they were working at odds of a triangle, like they were each holding ropes and kind of pulling against one another. And what she realized is that if instead they think more three-dimensionally and they think of that triangle instead more like a pyramid, and thinking that they're all looking up towards that same goal. The teacher, the student, the parent, they all want what's best for the student, to help that student reach their full potential. And once they all realize that they're really working together towards that same goal, they can be much more productive. And what we have done at Real is put that pyramid on top of a really solid foundation of strengths and interests. So strengths and interests grounding everything that the student experiences and does to the fullest extent possible. We can weave that into their interventions. We can put that into their accommodations. We can talk with them about what works, talk with them so that we make sure that they are getting those strengths and interests supported and honored in the classroom. And that will then really help make the student, parent, and the teacher realize that they're all working together towards that same goal. So this is Henry. Henry loved drawing, but he really struggled with writing. So instead of writing a blog post about a current event from the past week, Henry's teacher allowed him to draw his own political cartoons and post those instead. Henry enthusiastically created those weekly cartoons, since drawing was a real strength and interest of his. And because he was really able to make sophisticated commentary through his drawings, given his real strengths in that medium. The teacher could see that he understood the current events and was making deep connections, just like his peers might have been doing with their blog posts and written summaries. And his teachers encouraged him to submit his work to the school newsletter and introduced him to the journalism teacher. And his cartoons actually became a regular feature, and he went on to join the yearbook team at his middle school. So again, this is a student who could have just felt like he was really bad at this work, wasn't able to produce what was requested of him, and kind of maybe muddled along, but instead we have a student who was seen for his great abilities, able and encouraged to really dive deep into them and to integrate them meaningfully into the work, and it then became a core part of his positive experience at school. This is Sam, Jacob, and Lance, and when their teacher needed to see understanding of content in 6th grade ancient civ class, Sam, Jacob, and Lance pooled their Legos together and made a beautiful exhibit of ancient India. Because all 3 boys had severe executive functioning issues, they made a video of their exhibit with a recording of all the parts instead of doing it via written paper. Later in the year, the teacher did want to see the skill of a developed multiple paragraph essay, so the kids were allowed to choose any issue that spanned multiple civilizations and compare and contrast. The 3 boys worked with extra scaffolding and also often came together and worked in a small group. And by working in their areas of interest, it provided them the motivation they needed to lessen those struggles that they faced getting through the writing process. And here are some tips for attending to strength at every level. So again, things like thinking about strength-based IEP goals, giving students menus and options to choose how they show what they know, genius hours, passion projects, interest-based clubs, all of these sorts of different suggestions at every level. The last petal is around reframing behaviors. So as Ross Green says, kids do well if they can. So the mind shift here is to really think about when we see a student and we see behaviors that we were not expecting and are undesired, what's getting in those students' way? How can we uncover those barriers, and how can we remove those barriers, and how can we help so that the student can be more successful? So quick tips are around things like collaborating with the child, the parents, and the team to identify root causes, thinking about some sensory and environmental factors, so some hidden factors that perhaps are less notable. A great example of that might be a student who you see maybe during a circle time in an elementary school level. Maybe they're really fidgeting, or they're behaving in a way that you don't want during the time when they're all sitting on the rug. Maybe if you speak with that student, you might find out that the rug is itchy, or they're feeling like they're sitting closer than they want to their peers, or the lights are too bright, or the sound is too loud. So there may be things going on that are not obvious on the surface that you could make some quick and simple changes to make the classroom a more successful environment for that student. We acknowledge that this is probably the most challenging of the 4 petals. And I think some of the core things that are important to keep in mind is that we always want to attend to our own wellness and ability to regulate, co-regulate, and acknowledge that there are, things that you do well in some points and some other times where, you can always improve. And this is one of the petals that we most encourage people, that it takes time and practice, and it gets easier over time. This is a great graphic that I think might, one of the things I would recommend teachers maybe put up and keep in their classroom as a reference. So really, again, reframing behavior, moving from kids won't do this, why aren't they doing this, why won't they do this, to why can't they do it yet? So really switching from a student who, from seeing a student as perhaps willful or defiant, until thinking like, what is getting in their way? What are those stressors or deficits that are causing the challenges? How can we work together to remove those barriers? And so this, again, that student feels that connection and support that we talked about in that first petal. They're feeling that feeling that this is a person who wants to help them, who wants to figure things out, instead of feeling guilt or shame or frustration. Another great graphic, I love to talk about this analogy, I have it here actually printed on my desk by my screen to look at all the time, is that notion of what you're seeing that's the unexpected behavior is only really that tip of a very large iceberg. And what we're trying to do to work more successfully with our 2E and neurodivergent students is uncover what's going on down there, or go down there with that submarine and figure out what are those cognitive, social, emotional, biological challenges that are causing that little bit of unexpected behavior to peek up above the surface. And if we can really take our time to understand that, that's how we're going to be more successful with our students. So this is Jonah, and in 2nd grade, he was highly gifted and had sensory processing issues. When he was bored, he would put his shirt over his head and rub his chest and belly, which really made his classmates uncomfortable. So the teacher did ask him about the behavior and sort of uncovered that it was about sensory needs. So she went to the fabric store and made a variety of small boards with different fabrics on it that he could play with and feel. And he would use those in the classroom when he needed that sensory stimulation. So it really worked and made everyone else in the classroom much more comfortable around him. And I want to end with our video here of Serena. Serena is she was a bright middle school student. In this video you'll watch of her, she's in high school reflecting back on her middle school experience. And in light of her academic strengths, teachers were perplexed by the fact that she was routinely out of her seat, wandering around the classroom. They saw the behaviors as deliberate and under control, and she was regularly sent to the office. And it wasn't until high school that Serena was diagnosed with ADHD, and things started to really make more sense for her. And if a teacher had understood those behaviors as a manifestation of ADHD and accommodated her needs for movement and supported her in the classroom, her experience may have been more positive. So in this video, you'll hear a little bit from her. She's now a college student in the video, and from some of her teachers and what they were seeing during during that time?
I was the assistant principal at Miller Middle School, which is where I met Serena. She was really bright. She got excellent grades, if my memory serves me correctly, but she was atypical in a way, and I know that her teachers often were perplexed by her.
Hi, my name is Serena. I am a sophomore at Columbia University. I actually wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until my junior year in high school. But it's been something that's been impacted me my entire life, obviously.
Because I didn't make an assumption of, ADHD or maybe some other type of learning disability or learning difference or whatever. I didn't assume that. Then what I did assume is it must be her fault. It must be her intentionally acting out.
Most of the time, I didn't even know I was acting out because I just thought it was completely normal. I didn't know that you can just get up randomly and run around the class, for example. So that was those were some things that happened to me in middle school. I found myself in the office a lot. My parents got emails a lot. I think it's both not knowing I had ADHD and also because of the ADHD, because obviously ADHD makes me more impulsive, and then it's something that can be assuaged with the knowledge that you have ADHD.
There's something about kids that are quite bright that they get a little bit dismissed in the classroom.
In high school, I reached out to my counselor because I was like, okay, this kind of isn't adding up. I shouldn't really be spending 8 hours studying for something that I would end up getting a C at. He basically was like, your grades are too high. There's no way that you have a learning disability or ADHD or anything like that.
I started to think maybe I don't, as readily recognize signs of ADHD in girls.
When you think ADHD, I think most people still think of the white boy stereotype. I don't think that exactly popped into their head when they were dealing with me and when they were trying to find out what was up with me. I was finally diagnosed and then had accommodations. But there was also this thing there were Asian stigma around the subject of learning disabilities and neurodiversity. No one really wants to think that your child is weaker or your child is different. So there's a lot of pressure on not placing a label on yourself.
What I did find myself doing was advocating for students who are getting under their teacher's skins and helping the teacher understand that there may be things at play here. It's not that the kid is doing this intentionally, but there are things that are not completely in the child's control or level of awareness as well. And it's really up to us as the adults to help them to help bring that to their awareness.
A huge change from just being demonized as a child to being oh, there is something. I am not the terrible person that I was made to be or I thought I was. In order to support TUI learners, teachers need to have a really good understanding of what it is. And also they need to not be afraid of mentioning that possibility to a parent. You can be high achieving, you can still struggle. It's not something that is dependent on IQ. It's not something that's dependent on capability. If anything, it's something that only increases your capability once you have the diagnosis, once you have the supportive measures to work around what you couldn't previously. That's what really helps me navigate my TUI journey.
So again, we have these practical suggestions at all levels, and I encourage you to download the white paper so you can read all of this. And we have research and we have resources, all of that available in that document. So I will encourage you as I wrap up today to just sort of think a minute about a student in your classroom or perhaps your own child, and what are some things that you could do if you're an educator to help develop connection with that child, or a parent, in what ways can you help encourage that in the classroom? How can you see expanded options for student work for more voice and choice in the classroom? Or perhaps thinking about how you could increase access for time and space for students working in their areas of strength. So maybe genius hours or open sessions during your class, incorporating the last 10 minutes, rotating through different students to present something on an area of interest in the classroom. Or how might you reframe some unwanted behavior you might be seeing to help consider those underlying needs and uncover those underlying barriers and concerns. All right, thank you so much. And I will stop sharing now. We have about 5 or 6 minutes. We can answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Abby. I love hearing the stories, especially watching the Serena video. It's so touching. We have a question around how can we effectively partner with teachers who view accommodations as an unnecessary burden or imposition?
Yeah, I think that is a question that we get a lot. Recently at the Stanford panel, I was on with an educator as a principal at a local public school, and I think that she was right in acknowledging, look, up front, there is a little bit more work, a little bit more planning needs to go into understanding, what are those flexible options, what are the accommodations that are required, but when we do take that time to set that up, the dividends really pay off over time. And we can start small. We don't need to fully change, throw out our entire curriculum and then do a whole entire new one. We can make small changes iteratively that can improve these things. So as an educator, you can start with one pedal, think about some ways you might make change, try that out. Once that's going smoothly, start to think about some other ways you can change incrementally. And the other big thing I would say is that, again, when we offer our accommodations to everyone, it's just a number of things happen when we do that. First of all, we make it very clear that these things aren't lowering the bar or giving someone some unfair advantage, but these are different techniques that anyone can use, that anyone might enjoy using or prefer to use or get a benefit from, and that makes no one different than anyone else. That also makes it much simpler to manage in terms of remembering who's allowed to use some things and who isn't. If everyone is allowed to use everything, all things are treated with equal respect. And then the students then have that contract and buy-in to say they need to use them in a successful manner. But that definitely takes some of the burden off the educator in terms of management.
Sorry, I think the question was from a parent standpoint versus a teacher standpoint. How does a parent get their child onto the school to accept an accommodation for the child? It's not the teacher how they will deal with the accommodation. I think.
That's a question that we also hear a lot from parents. And I think it's an awareness. It's awareness. And so the teachers, I recommend as parents that there's a few different ways you can interact and sort of help get that message across to teachers. You can point them in the direction of our resources and information. You can print out our fact sheets and give them to the teachers. And you can sort of talk about what makes school, or how your child is more successful in different scenarios and situations. So you can, phrase it in a way saying that, like, I've noticed that my child is more successful when XYZ happens. And, if you try some of these options, you may see a student who's you're going to, enjoy to have in your classroom more. And so, or, can contribute more to the classroom in a more positive way. And so I think that, again, it's just an awareness. It's not an easy fit. Or there's no one, magic bullet that I can just say these 3 words and, things will change. But slowly, as we're able to change the narrative and get more folks exposed to some of these things, and I think help our teachers understand that ultimately this is in their interest as well, because they'll have more successful classroom environments, we can slowly affect that change. Yael and Callie, do you have other things you want to add there?
No, I thought that was great. And I've had personal experience with my own child's teachers, working with them sort of project by project. Let's discuss how this particular project could be made more accessible to my child. And for example, they were coloring in beanstalks because they were going to measure beanstalks for math. And my son wanted to color it a bunch of crazy colors, and the teacher wanted him to only color it green. But the lesson was about math and measurement and not about biology. And so when she let him color his thing in crazy colors, all the other kids did too, and they loved the project so much more. So the more flexibility I convinced the teachers to give for my own child, it turned out it helped the whole classroom. So it's a slow growth, but you start in one area and hopefully over time it improves. So we're going to actually wrap up because it is at 1 hour. We will be sending out the slides and the recording to all of you. Thank you so much for attending. And please visit real2e.org to learn about all of our other resources and upcoming talks and recordings of previous events. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Are we still recording?